What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods coming at you with another episode in our Big 10 in 31 days thing we have going on this month. And we are joined by Stephen Brooks, who is a Michigan State beat reporter for 247 Sports. And I just wanted to say, man, I appreciate you taking time today to join me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
For sure. So, we got to talk about last season. It was a weird season with COVID, especially with the Big 10. We didn't even think the Big 10 was going to play football till late August, September. The Spartans finished 2-5, but did this season, just based on what you were expecting being Tucker's first season, did this season exceed, fall short of, or meet your preseason expectations?
It was tough to even have expectations, honestly, just given how weird everything was. Um, and Michigan State isn't in a unique spot. I'm sure we'll get into this, in different ways over the course of this. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think, I've heard the idea of year zero embraced by a lot of folks, and now 21 is really year one for Tucker to a lot of them. And I can agree with a lot of that just because the challenges were so unique, and especially even in Michigan State. I know everybody had tons of challenges with this past year, but with Tucker's late arrival, the timing of it all really made it especially tough on them in certain ways. So I think it was about what people expected. They didn't go winless, and the two wins were big. That's a huge part of it. When you're talking about beating Michigan, which hey didn't end up being a great team, but ended up that's always an important win, and for that to be so early. And Tucker to win the first one against him means something here. So, and then the other one was against Northwestern, who was number 8 and unbeaten at the time. So the bright spots were pretty bright, but other than that, people did expect it to be a down year. They acknowledged that that the talent had dropped off, in the program at the end of the D'Antonio era, and that Tucker wasn't just walking into like a ready-made deal by any means. So, people would like 1 or 2 more wins, I'm sure, make them sleep a little easier, but it wasn't total failure. And, I think really just avoiding that, like avoiding embarrassment and like totally going off the rails was really the only goal at the end of the day. And they definitely did that, did enough to inspire some confidence. And I think that's kind of what it is. It's still, there's still so much to be written about how this is all going to play out.
Right. And, August 11th was the date that Big 10 Commissioner Kevin Warren made that ruling to postpone the season. I believe it was 6 days after he plans and releases this conference only schedule. Was Michigan State behind the scenes fighting this decision? We heard publicly Nebraska, Iowa, some Ohio State talk. I mean, Nebraska was even rumored to try to leave the Big 10. Was Michigan State fighting back? And I just want to know, what was your initial reaction, and what was Michigan State's plan if let's say Kevin Warren doesn't change his mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. I think Michigan State was one of the quieter in the bunch, when that was all going on. Look, they just brought in a new president. I forget exactly. He's been there less than 2 years. I think this might be his second academic year. It is, I'm pretty sure. He's an infectious disease expert. He's a medical doctor by trade. That's their president. Okay, so they were in no position as a school to be out there publicly or privately, I believe, to be making any kind of movement toward that. And then you've got, again, Mel Tucker, who's fresh on the job, doesn't want to rock the boat any. And why would you? There's really no need. And especially because it kind of helped him, I mean, you could make a very strong argument at that time that not playing a season, you ask, what if they don't reverse? At the time, there you could make a compelling argument that would have been a good thing for Michigan State. So, like I mentioned off the top, if people are confused, like Mel Tucker was hired on February 12th. That's a very, very late time in the cycle for a Power 5 head coach to take over.
Yeah.
And then the COVID shutdowns essentially came in mid-March. We're talking March 12, 13, 14. He had one recruiting weekend since he's been on the job to this day. So, even a guy like Greg Schiano, you want to talk about first-year coaches. He was hired in December and got on the job, got some transfers in. Like, there's really not a comparable situation. Again, I do understand everybody had a lot of the same complications, but Michigan State did have some unique ones with that timing. So he's in here February 12th. He gets a staff by like the end of February, and literally just days later, everything's different. Half the summer's gone, and the season's on and it's off. So that circles me all back to, at that point they were so behind the 8 ball. No spring ball, of course. included in all that. So would it really have hurt them, to not play? I was somebody at that time. I was like, man, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing just for Michigan State. Of course, everybody wants to play. I want them to play,
Right.
but at that point, you could understand some practical reasons why a delay might help them because they were so far behind, just in terms of this new staff taking over.
Right. I mean that stat about up until even today, he's only had 1 week of off-campus recruiting. That has to be the most brutal situation of all time. And I want to get to some on-the-field stuff. We saw kind of a quarterback battle, I guess you could call it, between Rocky Lombardi and Peyton Thorne throughout the year. What does each of these quarterbacks need to improve on, in your opinion? And do you think either guy's going to become the starter next year, or do you think a transfer like Anthony Rousseau, who's coming in from Temple, is going to end up taking that QB1 role?
So Lombardi's gone. He's already left. He's at NIU
Okay.
now, Northern Illinois. So he's out of there. Yeah, when you say battle, it's like it's like when the fumble's on the ground and nobody can pick it up. They're just squirting it out. Like it wasn't a
Yeah.
battle and like two guys trying to grab it. It was just like who could, who was the least bad, I guess. It's kind of how it
Right.
ended up being to a certain degree. So yeah, anyway, I think it comes down to right now, I think to Peyton Thorne, who's however you want to look at it, a redshirt freshman again, I guess, or a third year redshirt freshman, or however you want to, like I said, call that with the eligibility freeze. He only got to play a little bit at the end. He only got the one start against Penn State. He had a really nice first half against Penn State. So there's still a lot to be determined with him. He's the son of a coach, grandson of a coach. His dad is a coach in the D3 ranks. Just won a national title at North Central College 1 or 2 years ago. So smart dude, smaller, a little nimble. Not going to kill you with his legs, but can move. Quick release. Pitch it and go type of guy. But I just think so Lombardi hadn't played well enough to have to take as many snaps as he did. So the
Right.
fact that we didn't see Thorne earlier last year kind of raises some red flags. If you trust the coaching staff, and they've given us no reason not to yet in that front. So, his smaller sample size, he did some good things. I would have liked to see more of him. I think there were moments for sure in some of those losses where it was appropriate to get him in, I thought, and that didn't happen until late in the season. So there's a lot to be seen with him. He's a guy that really probably could have used spring ball last year. All that being said, I think Russo comes in. I mean, they don't go get a seasoned, a 20 plus game starter for nothing. And he doesn't come in I'm sure if he doesn't see a favorable situation in some way. I absolutely see him as that bridge guy right now. I would say he's the leader, definitely if they suited him up today. But, with his experience going through spring ball, I think that he'll just raise the baseline at that position. I don't expect him to wow people. I mean, if he does, good for them. But I do think it's mostly just about raising that baseline because last year it was so inconsistent and below average most of the time. So if he can just give you a steady, B minus, B plus on some days performance every day, that's a huge upgrade, relatively speaking. So I like him right now. And then they brought in a kid named Hampton Fay as this staff's first true freshman, first QB signee. So that's interesting. I don't think he'll be ready. He had a shoulder injury in high school, so he only started 10 games at quarterback between his injury and the pandemic. So a lot of he's a guy that's like super raw, but you like the ceiling. But I don't really expect him to be in the mix. But he's just another guy to know like for down the line.
Right. And I mean, those QB struggles have to be so hard for especially a defensive minded head coach who has spent his whole career building defenses. And that's what I kind of want to talk about. Head coach Mel Tucker, you've mentioned, just finished his first year, kind of a crazy hire, goes to Colorado, goes away after 1 year, comes to Michigan State, but he built one of the most dominant defenses in the country at Georgia, even has some time at Alabama. What makes him such a special coach? And personally, do you think he's the right guy to rebuild Michigan State?
Oh man, that's a huge question. In terms of like just him, I mean, he lives football, and like I guess all these guys do once you get to a head coach at a Power Five like that. But that really sticks out. I mean, like just like anybody. I mean, he came up under Saban, okay, so there's a lot of that in
Right.
him. I think you should be encouraged, or at least withhold judgment, I guess, if you're a State fan. his resume is outstanding. It's just that he's not a proven head coach, and there's a big difference, as we all know, when you're in that big seat at the end of the day. But his resume, again, I mean, Nick Saban, Jim Tressel, Romeo Crennel, all these different guys, NFL experience of about a decade, I think. So he knows what it takes. He's been on every side of it. And he's been at, what I think should be most encouraging is he's been at Alabama and Georgia most recently. I guess the 1 year at Colorado, of course, but so he's been in the thick of it and seen how the elite of the elite run. He knows what it's supposed to look like, what your players are supposed to look like, what the process and infrastructure are supposed to look like, and so he's brought some of that here. What he's done so far has brought Michigan State in a lot of ways, into the 21st century, into 2021, and the modern game. And I mean that in terms of the recruiting staff. There's more bodies there. There's way more going on with that from a staffing perspective. There's a whole creative department now, that does all the graphics and videos and all that. Like that's that might not seem like much, but that's an investment, and that's keeping up with the Joneses. So they've got a new facility on the way and stuff. So I think like I said, I think he's moving it in the right direction. But it's really going to be, it's obviously too early to say. I like that things that he's brought here in terms of that energy. It's a program that needed that energy, needed some, just some juice, a shot in the arm or something, because the D'Antonio era at the end had gotten so just sort of sleepy and outdated, and there was just apathy setting in, and that wasn't too far removed from some really good years. So, like I said, the main takeaway so far is Tucker has brought a lot of energy, modernized a lot of things, and now I think it's on him to capitalize on some of this stuff in terms of getting some recruits, not just getting in the top 3 and 4 like you weren't doing before still, but actually closing, and then of course his acumen on game day and how his teams play and what type of stuff he draws up to get wins.
Right. And I mean, I think there's kind of an opening right now in the Big Ten, especially with Michigan not being what they were. Nebraska is, I would say, arguably a dumpster fire right now. And there's some openings. We saw Minnesota take a huge step back. So I'm interested to see what he does. But I love having people on 247 on here because I love talking recruiting. I'm a recruiting guy. And you guys can talk it. It's, a lot of people don't follow it as closely as I do. But National Signing Day wrapped up. The Spartans' top 50 class, according to 247. They had some great high school talent, but the real story for me, 9 transfers in this recruiting class coming from all around the country, includes players from Michigan, Florida. As you see the Auburn jerseys in the background, you guys probably got my favorite player in the transfer portal, Harold Joyner. I love that kid at 6'4", running back. Which transfers do you think were Michigan State's biggest targets, and who do you think will make an immediate impact?
Yeah, and that goes back to what I just said in terms of modernizing things and hey, the transfer portal's here, the smart coaches are using it. You might not like it or whatever, but it is what it is, and that's a way to make your team better. And they have been as aggressive as anybody doing it. In terms of most important to me, right away, it's Jarrett Horst, the offensive tackle from Arkansas State. He was from Wisconsin originally, went to JUCO, ended up at Arkansas State. 2 pretty good years there, all conference guy in the Sun Belt. And then his coach, the coaching staff turned over, and he went out and he had Oklahoma and Texas and a bunch of good names after him. And then Michigan State got him anyway. So they've been down at tackle for a long time. Their offensive line in general, for folks that aren't into it, every week, their offensive line has been a weak spot in the program for a while, and especially offensive tackle. They've been playing basically, guards at tackle for quite a while now. They lack that true long, agile tackle type, and that's this guy. So I think he's plug and play starter from day one. And then what he does is moves Kevin Jarvis, who is a natural guard, who was filling in at right tackle, moves him into right guard. So you make 2 spots better with one right away. Absolutely a big deal because, again, the offensive line has been, subpar for Big Ten competition for multiple years now. And now you get, Jarvis is probably their best player, was before Horst at least. So, like I said, you move him back to his natural spot. You add an all-conference, Sun Belt guy at tackle. You would assume he's at worst an average Big Ten player, and you take a big jump there. I think Kenneth Walker from Wake Forest, he's an exciting dude to watch. Surprised that I guess maybe I shouldn't say surprise, but a bummer for Wake Forest letting him get away because he is really good. I think he'll probably be their starter, honestly. He just sort of brings that complete package that they don't really have. They were running at the end of the year mostly with Jordan Simmons, a true freshman, and he's a straight line home run hitter type, but he's not really built to be a 3-down guy, whereas I think Walker is. I keep looking over here because I gotta have him on a list to make sure I don't miss anybody. Russo, like I said, if they played today, I think he'd start, and I don't really see that. I wouldn't imagine that changes, through fallout. I would expect him to be the game one starter, but I might look dumb, I guess, after spring ball in a couple of weeks by saying that. Chester Kimbrough will be in the mix to start at cornerback. That's a position that's been thinned out extremely through the transfer portal. They've brought in a ton of guys. They've lost a ton of guys in the transfer portal this year. I think it's 15 or 16 even. Well over a dozen, I know. So, and cornerback was a position that got hit hard. So I think he'll be right in that mix. And then the other one I got to mention is Ben Van Sumeren, who, comes over from Michigan, which in its own right is an interesting deal. Linebacker is another position that got thinned out real bad by graduation and the transfer portal. So he'll have a shot right away. And I don't think they're done yet at linebacker. I wouldn't be surprised to see one, maybe even two more guys there because there's opportunity, to go around at that spot right now.
Right. I mean, I think there's, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Henry Toto from Tennessee, former 5-star, still in the transfer portal, so that could be someone interesting to watch. But I think Alabama is the leader for him. Of course, they are. As an Auburn fan, they're in the lead for everybody. But looking way ahead, the Spartans have the number 31 class right now for 2022. We still got a long way to go, but that window has seemed to be shrinking due to early signing day. You want to have your class roll in way earlier now that you can sign these kids in December. What positions for you are the biggest needs for Michigan State this upcoming year? And who are some players we need to watch out for that Michigan State, if they got to pick 1, 2, 3 people, would land right now if they could?
Well, I mean, it's you could take your pick at a lot of spots. Again, offensive line is a big one. They just took a big class with I think it was 5. I kind of like cycled 21 out of my brain already. I think it was 4 or 5 offensive linemen last class, and I think those are some solid, depth guys at worst. Decent starters at best, probably. I think this class has a shot to be your upper level, high level starters, maybe fringe all conference guys potentially, like your big timers on the offensive line. They've already got 2 committed, 2 guys who project at guard, Christian Phillips and Gavin Brocious. And then they're kind of just hunting down some big time tackles, or at least really just any tackles, I guess. Like I mentioned earlier, they lack that body type on the roster. So, I won't just, bore people with just 30 names, I guess. But I mean, like, Keontae Goodwin, is a guy that they'd really love to get. Jacob Allen is a good guy out of New Jersey they'd love there. Defensive back is going to be a big class. Quarterback, of course, again, you always want to see them get a high choice. And that's the interesting thing right now as we talk today is so many of these top QBs in this class are committing and committing early in the cycle. And it's interesting because visits are off right now, of course, but they are down the line, it looks like, and so but these guys are jumping at it right away, and they've been going through this obviously for a year now without any visits. So that is interesting. And they're in on a good amount of 4-star top 300 kids and all of that. AJ Duffy out of IMG is announcing this month, and they're in the mix for him. Some guys out in California, so you want to see that. I don't know if there's any. I don't think it's as much position, to be honest with you, man, as just upgrading talent. And like I mentioned that a bit earlier, like that was one of the big things at the end of the D'Antonio eras. People say, what happened to Michigan State? Or why'd they fall off? They just you got to really look at the talent just had declined a little bit. And they're starting. They could get a good 22 out there maybe still, but the 2 deep, that's where you really felt it. And so, like I said, there's not as much of a. I don't think there is positions, of course, defensive end, cornerback. Tight end's a spot they really got to replenish. Linebacker, you'd like to see a couple more guys. But like I said, I think it's more about just upgrading positions, almost a NFL draft best available kind of mindset. Of course, you have your framework, but yeah, across the board, there's no spot that Michigan State can't upgrade their talent level right now to compete because they are absolutely a click behind. the top dogs and maybe, a click and a half of Ohio State right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we talked to Matt Andrews from Ohio State, and that's what he said. We were talking about the perception of the Big Ten. He said everyone just seems to be a step or two behind in recruiting, and that's kind of hurt the perception of the Big Ten at times. And I want to look forward to next year, though. That we talk about Russo, we talk about some of these incoming freshmen, but who might be on the roster right now that you think could really shine and have their breakout season this upcoming year?
Ooh, that's interesting. The two offensive linemen. I know it's not sexy. I know we've talked a lot of O-line here, but if you follow Michigan State again, it's important. And you know how bad it's been. But these two guys, guard J.D. Duplain and center Nick Samak, I would expect them to have nice third years. They got thrown in right away as not right away, but as true freshmen middle of that year, and held their own. And then last year, I thought took some steps and still look like sophomores. And next year, I think after basically, just getting a ton of time their first 2 years, I think they should be ready to like I said, be that very solid starter. Maybe fringe all conference type of thing. Maybe that'd be a big step. Trenton Gillison, their tight end, is a guy that we've been waiting to sort of have that breakout year, and it's still a position, like I mentioned, that doesn't have much depth, so there's opportunity. He's a guy that's like 6'4", 250-ish, can be that sort of, middle of the field mismatch and stuff, moves well. And he's just never really gotten it going since he's been here. Former 4-star kid. He'd be a breakout guy. Any of the receivers, I think, could have a big year. I mean, they sort of relatively had nice years last year with the shortened year. I like all those guys. Jaden Reed is a guy I'm a big fan of. Jalen Naylor is I think, going to be a big-time player for him. Trey Mosley, I think, could come out and have a big year. They got a lot of nice receivers right now. Defensive backfield is totally sort of unproven in a lot of ways. Linebackers, basically a clean slate almost, and yeah, D-line sort of the same way. So, yeah, I would say those would be the guys. Another one I guess would be defensive tackle Jalen Hunt. I like him a lot. He was a backup last year. He'll have a much bigger role this year. He was a guy who they got late in the cycle in 2019. He was going to Iowa and things didn't work out, and they ended up getting him. And he's been a nice, real late. It's one of those diamond in the rough type of guys, and I think he'll have a nice year this year.
Right. And, looking at the schedule moving forward, I mean, this schedule has some brutal road trips on it. I mean, to go to Northwestern, that like week one, have a road trip to Miami, who was returning De'Aaron King, who's a stud quarterback, a road trip to Indiana. We've seen what Tom Allen's doing over there, and a road trip to Ohio State, along with some other tough games coming into Michigan State. What do you think the ceiling and or floor could be for this 2021 team?
Oh man, yeah, that's tough. Like you said, it is hard. It looks hard right now. Of course, we never really know. I guess Miami is obviously a big one. Western Kentucky, I don't know what they did last year, but I mean they're usually a respectable team at that group of 5 team. They're usually you're not just going to walk over them typically. At Indiana, yeah, I mean that actually might be tough this year. They got some hype building in there right now, and I'm a huge Michael Penix fan. I think he's really nice. And then at Ohio State, yeah, I mean that speaks for itself. Michigan, Penn State at home, you like that? So I mean, without really breaking down game by game and momentum and stuff, like I think most folks want to see 6 wins and get to a bowl, and I think that they'd be happy with that for the most part. Where those all factor in, I mean, look, it might be hard to go down the line right now, but I think that would be it. I don't see them competing for much more than that. I mean, I think 8 wins would be like a miracle season somehow, or guys are just a lot better, and these plug and play guys are seamless fits, and they're all of a sudden, they're new players, they're better players, they're experienced players, and off they go. I don't necessarily see that, for all of them. I'm sure there'll be a couple nice hits like that, but yeah, like I think you're looking at anywhere. The true range probably 4 to 8. They're not so bad that they're just going to bottom out, but 4 to 8, and probably most likely right there in the middle though, like 5 or 6.
Right. And, like these 2 last questions here. One is about the environment of East Lansing and Spartan Stadium. The other one, I like to see where, I guess, people outside our listening bases in the South. I'm from Alabama. My co-host on hiatus right now is from Louisiana. So we are SEC country-based podcast. How SEC fans are. kind of out there. I want to talk about the perception of the Big Ten. Why do you think there's this perception that it's Ohio State and everyone else in the Big Ten? Like, what do you think has to happen for the Big Ten to get the depth respect that you see some like the conference like the SEC get from the national media? Because for me, I thought Indiana was a true playoff contender until Michael Penix went down. I thought Northwestern had a lot of bright spots. They almost should have beat Ohio State. I think Penn State, Minnesota had down years, but Minnesota 2 years ago definitely was one of the best teams in the country. Why do you think that perception is so skewed in terms of the national landscape?
Yeah, and you mentioned all those examples. People up here believe strongly that I don't know if you guys remember, you or your listeners, but the Michigan State team that won the Rose Bowl in the 2013 season. It was a 2014 Rose Bowl, but 2013 season, when Auburn was in the national title game, people up here are convinced that Michigan State team would have went toe to toe to them with them at least. The way that MSU team was playing at the end there, and it was the right year right before the playoff came in, and people up here still talk about that like we would have beat that Auburn team and blah blah blah. But anyway, back on your point, if you're being real with yourself, it is Ohio State and everybody else. There's no other way to look at it. I think it's very clear. It was like that to a lesser degree in the early 2000s, but then Urban brought the SEC to Ohio State. That's what he did. I mean, I think we all saw that. He brought a national recruiting plan. He put his foot down on the pedal, through the floor on recruiting and changed the game there and said, looked way behind him and said, hey, keep up. And nobody could, and then it was just a seamless baton pass somehow to Ryan Day, who, we didn't really know that much about. And now he's almost cranked it up, another half gear, full gear, however you want to say it. They're at a different level. I mean, so nobody's close. It's not like, when Alabama's up there at the number one class, they've got LSU and Georgia and Florida right there nipping on their heels in the recruiting rankings. You don't have to take those as gospel. That's totally fine. But it is Ohio State and everybody else now. Why? Because they can do that. They can go into Texas and Georgia and Florida and California and Washington with the number one kid in 2021 who's still out there that they're battling for at the end. I forget his name. They can do that. Michigan State can't really do that. Iowa, not even Michigan anymore. They can't really compete in the same league with the highest of the high ends. Penn State can't do that. So when you're in those battles with Clemson and Alabama and Georgia, and you're winning a decent share of them, they've just distanced themselves. That's really what it is. And you've got superior talent. It looks like you've got superior coaching. All those added in factors of being, basically the pro team in their state and all that. And I guess I shouldn't say that, but I mean the only major team, the only major college. Right. So that is what it is. And Mel Tucker's been, like I said, he's been at Ohio State. He knows that, and he's been at Georgia and Alabama, so he knows what that type of program looks like. And he's taken big swings to try and make it. I mean, he's brought this sort of national plan to Michigan State. They're not just hitting Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania in a 5-hour radius anymore. I mean, they're in Louisiana, they're in Texas and New Jersey and Alabama, Georgia heavy, all these places. They're trying to really expand the map. Arizona. So they're taking a big swing because they know that you got to take a huge swing to try and catch Ohio State. They're trying. Like I said at the top, I don't know if it's going to work, but they're trying because he's seen where that you have to take those huge swings to even get in the same room with these guys in terms of the athletes. So that's really what it is. And then you've kind of got a consolidated second tier where you do have your Iowas, Penn State, Michigan, and then on your up years, Minnesota, Michigan State when they were good and all that stuff. So that's kind of just the reality of it, and like I said, it seems like Ohio State's just distancing itself, especially with what they do in the NFL draft every year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you see that. I mean, I believe not last year because LSU dominated. I think they had like 15 players drafted, but Ohio State the year before had like 12, if I'm not mistaken. So, and they always have a top 5 pick, it seems like. But I want to shift back to Michigan State, East Lansing, Spartan Stadium. I haven't been able to make a game. I've had some friends that went and said it's beautiful up there. They had a blast. So I really want to get up there. But for you, who's been in the environment, covered the team, what makes this town, Spartan Stadium, so unique on game days, and why should it be somewhere where college football fans put it on their bucket list to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna sell it up to be like this once in a lifetime experience. I think it's cool. I mean, I think it's a firmly upper middle half of the Big Ten experience. Like, look, I don't want to sell your guys short. Like, look, if you can go to Penn State for a whiteout, like first, like go there. If you can go to Kinnick Stadium for something, go there. Camp Randall, absolutely, go there first, and then go to the Horseshoe. So, again, but I think Michigan State, they don't sell enough to me is the campus though. Like it is beautiful. It sits right on a river. It's a small little river. It's not like you can pull up or anything like that. But it's just a very it's really a nice looking. If you're into nature, it's just very woodsy and scenic. With these buildings mixed in, there's a mix of really really old stuff, really really modern stuff. It just all works. And so wherever you end up parking, you're gonna have to take a walk probably through through just a really cool scene. To be honest, it's got a cool vibe in that regard. And like I said, I don't think they sell sort of that environment enough. It's really picturesque, especially late in the fall. A lot of these places are like tucked off into the corner of campus, or you got to take a shuttle there, or it's just surrounded by parking lots. There's just no character to it. Like it's dead center of campus, like I said, and you only got to take a 4-minute walk in some direction, and you're in a really really cool looking part, most likely by the river and all that. So, yeah, I mean, if you're in the area, sure, come check it out. Like I said, there's other ones that are better. I'm not going to BS people, but absolutely, it's got some nice qualities to it. Like if you enjoy just that fall Saturday feel, like you'll leave satisfied, I think.
Right. I definitely want to come up there for a game. I'm a stadium guy. I want to try to hit as many as I can. COVID smacked me in the face last year. I had a lot of trips planned that I ended up having to get a refund for. I got Penn State on my list this year. Auburn's going over there to play. Me and my friends have our whole thing planned. So hopes that COVID is somewhat toned down by then. We can get over there to Penn State. But man, I appreciate you joining me, coming on here to talk Michigan State football. We're doing this so all our listeners can get exposure from all around the country. So I shout out to you for that. But where can our listeners find you? Like, you can tell them about any 247 stuff you do, anything that you want to promote here. It's your time.
All right, cool. No, I appreciate it, man. So on Twitter, if you want a bunch of Michigan State tweets and articles, hit me up. It's at Stephen M_Brooks, and it's Stephen with a PH. And then, anything I write and do is all on best way to get to it is just SpartanTailgate.com. That'll redirect you to our homepage. That's the official name. Technically, like each 24/7 branch has their own little name. That's ours. Everything will be right there. Hit up our message boards. Come say what's up. And, if we ever get those rare SEC, non-conference crossovers and everything, then we'll chat it up. We were supposed to have Michigan State, Bama home and home once upon a time. So we would have had that to talk about. But, maybe one day.
Yeah, hopefully. I know there's pressure on all kind of universities now at the playoffs. You have to play those big non-conference games. It was cool. I got to go to Arlington and see Auburn play Oregon 2 years ago in Bo Nix's first game. That game ended up being way better than I ever thought. That was a game right there. I mean, we even go to just random games. Like we went up to Alabama for a game where they played LSU that 2016 with Fournette. We just try to make trips all around the country, man, but we'll definitely make it to Michigan State. But we would love to have you on closer to the season as things start ramping up with Michigan State. And man, have fun. I know you got to cover some basketball coming up, so hopefully Michigan State makes a run. I'll root for y'all because Auburn can't get in this year, so I need a team to root for.
Auburn has let me down a bunch in the wagering space. I'll just say they have been a huge letdown on multiple occasions. So I'm done with Auburn basketball.
It's okay. Yeah. It's all right, man. The Michigan State fans are great. They comforted me. I was in Minnesota for the Final Four, and I was there for the whole fiasco. And there were Michigan State fans. They were right up after us, and they were just like, "Man, I can't believe that happened." And one dude just gave me and my friends a hug. They're like, "It's gonna be okay," and I was like, "I don't think it is. This is the worst day of my life by far."
Man, I felt that for you guys and everything. I was right in front of right behind, I guess, the Auburn, like I think it was like the Taco Bell student section or whatever. Mm-hmm. Either way, it was like maybe like 200 students, or maybe not even that much. Wasn't many, but some dude just threw 2 beers up as high as he could, and the cops just came swarming from every direction. And I was like, man, his night just got so much worse. Like it was already going to be pretty bad, probably. But
it was gonna be bad either way. Yeah, I was up. I was on like that side of the stadium, but I was in like the way upper deck. So the angle we had, we didn't see the foul call because everyone jumped up because he missed it and everyone thought Auburn won. And so I can tell people safely I know what it's like for Auburn to go to the national championship, but then I know what it's like to have it taken away. So
yeah, I was there. That place was awesome. That was cool being in there. That new stadium.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. But guys, this is a wrap on this interview, man. Y'all know where to find us. It's been scrolling across the bottom. We'll be back later this week with Penn State. So make sure y'all check this out and the Penn State interview later this week. But for myself, for Steven, we are out.